Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the podcast. And today I am going to go to my review of AEW's Dynamite. This was a huge night for Dynamite, man. They're celebrating their 5-year anniversary. And we start off with a bang, man. It's for the international title. It is Will Ospreay defending the international title against Ricochet. I thought it was a great match, man. Back and forth matchup between Ospreay and Ricochet, with Ospreay and Ricochet both exchanging in the middle of the ring. Ricochet then hits a Hurricane Rana on Ospreay off the barricade. Ospreay gets up, hits a springboard forearm, taking out Ricochet. Ospreay then hits a Spanish Fly. Ospreay hits an Oz Cutter off the apron. Ricochet then gets up, hits an Oz Cutter of his own on Ospreay for a near fall. Ricochet then hits a pile driver for a near fall. Ospreay then gets up, hits a Styles Clash for a near fall. Ospreay hits an Oz Cutter. Ricochet gets up, hits a Shooting Star off the top rope for a near fall. Ospreay hits a Poison Rana, and then Ricochet hits a Poison Rana of his own. Both Ospreay and Ricochet shoulders were down. Referee calls for the bell. Referee says that the match ends in a draw. After that, Tony Schiavone says that the match will restart. Ospreay and Ricochet both exchange in the middle of the ring again, with Ospreay hitting a hidden blade. Takeshita comes out to the ring, attacks Ospreay. Match ends in a disqualification, and Takeshita holds up the international title. A couple things I want to talk about, man, here when it pertains to this Ospreay Ricochet match. Number one, I thought it was a great match. I thought it was a really good match from top to bottom. Obviously, there's a lot of people that were disappointed with this matchup. And quite frankly, I can't blame y'all, to be honest with you, man. My biggest thing with this Ricochet-Ospreay match is the build. The storyline, the build, and building up the storyline between Ricochet and Ospreay. We didn't get that at all. We didn't get that a single solitary moment leading up to this matchup, which I feel like it kind of took away from this match. Obviously, there's some history there between Ospreay and Ricochet from having matches on the Indies, from Rev Pro to even probably PWG. They've had matches before. You know what I mean? With no build, just, a high-profile match. AEW has a really hard time telling storylines, man. And I have mentioned this, and I have said this pretty much till I'm blue in the face, that AEW has a hard time building stories and building a storyline and building us and hyping up this matchup, or hyping up any match for that matter. They have a really hard time building storylines. And I told you guys multiple times that, AEW kind of seems like it's like All Japan Pro Wrestling, where, Tony Khan has a tendency to constantly book these dream matches, and it's here and now, and that's it. There's no build, there's no storyline. It's just, here's the match, and here it is. And some fans may like that, and some fans are pretty much, they might be gravitated towards that. For me personally, as a fan, wrestling is about the storyline. Wrestling is about the story, the when, the where, and the how. And we didn't get that with this matchup between Will Ospreay and Ricochet. So I feel like I kind of took away a little bit out of the match between Ospreay and Ricochet. As far as the match itself, it was a good match, man. I don't know what's going to happen next with Ricochet, but it looks like Will Ospreay will have his sights set on Takeshita. It looks like Takeshita is eyeing up the international title, so it's definitely going to be an interesting matchup between Ospreay and Takeshita, because their last match was an absolute banger. Moving on from that, we have a learning tree segment. Jericho comes out to the ring. He talks about AEW's new TV deal, which I will talk about at the end of the podcast. Jericho talks about his career. Jericho says it is time for a new era. Jericho then challenged Mark Briscoe for the Ring of Honor title at Wrestle Dream. Mark comes out to the ring. Mark hypes up Jericho, pays a little respect to Jericho. But then Jericho mocks Mark. He mentions Jay Briscoe, tells Mark that he will never be better than his brother Jay. After that, Mark says that it will be official, Jericho versus Briscoe at Wrestle Dream for the Ring of Honor World Heavyweight title. Definitely looking forward to that matchup at Wrestle Dream. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Adam Page versus Juice Robinson. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Page and Robinson, with Page keeping the pace of the match. Juice hits a running cannonball through the barricade, taking out Page. Page hits a fall-away slam on Juice. Juice hits a powerbomb on Page. Page hits a low blow, with the referee being distracted, which allowed Page to hit a buckshot lariat on Juice Robinson, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Adam Page. After the match, Page attacks Juice Robinson, and then all of a sudden, Jay White comes out to the ring. He attacks Page, and he saves Juice from Adam Page. And it's great to see that Jay White finally returns to AEW after being out with a lengthy injury. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Serena Deeb versus Britt Baker. I thought it was a good match, back and forth matchup. Baker was keeping the pace of the match, with Deeb hitting a powerbomb for a near fall. But Baker applies a lockjaw on Deeb, and your winner of the match is Britt Baker. After the match, Deeb attacks Baker. Queen Aminata comes out to the ring to save Britt Baker. Hats off to Baker for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into a tag team matchup. It is the Iron Savages versus Private Party. I thought it was a decent match. Glorified squash match. Private Party was keeping the pace with Private Party hitting a gin and juice, pins for the 3. And your winners of the match are Private Party. Hats off to Private Party for getting the win in this matchup. After the match, though, Private Party calls out the Bucks. Perry then attacks the Bucks, attacks Private Party from behind. Bucks then attack Private Party. Shibata comes out to the ring to try to help out Private Party. Daniels is here. Private Party and Shibata will team up versus Perry and the Bucks on Rampage this Friday. Moving on from that, we have an MVP announcement. MVP is met backstage with Renee Paquette, but he is quickly interrupted by Prince Nana. Nana looks like he has some frustrations with MVP. Nana then mocks MVP. MVP tells Nana that he doesn't deal with the drama. He has someone else for that. And he introduces none other than Shelton Benjamin. Shelton Benjamin is now all elite. This is a big deal for AEW. And like I told you guys, most likely when we saw MVP, we're going to see Shelton Benjamin as well as Bobby Lashley. So again, a great addition to the AEW roster with the addition of Shelton Benjamin. Moving on from that, we go into our main event of AEW Dynamite. It is for the Continental title as well as the AEW title, but there is a stipulation. Bryan Danielson has 20 minutes in this matchup to beat Okada to win the Continental Championship. If he does not do it in 20 minutes, the belt is off the line, and that the AEW title will be on the line for the remainder of the match. It was a great match, man. It was a back-and-forth matchup between Okada and Danielson, with Danielson keeping the pace of the match. Danielson lands multiple yes kicks on Okada. Okada and Danielson both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Okada hitting an elbow drop off the top rope on Danielson. Danielson then applies a label lock, but the hold is broken. Danielson then hits a running knee. The 20 minutes have passed. The Continental Championship is no longer being defended. Danielson then hits a springboard senton to the outside, taking out Okada. Okada gets up, hits a tombstone pile driver on Danielson. Okada then hits a Rainmaker. Danielson then gets up, hits a Rainmaker of his own on Okada for a near fall. Claudio and Pac are here. Danielson then hits a roll-up, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is Bryan Danielson. After the match, Okada hits a Rainmaker on Danielson. Looks like he was pissed off. Moxley comes out to the ring, but he's also stopped by Wheeler Yuta. Yuta comes out to the ring to save Bryan Danielson. A couple of things I want to talk about, man, when it pertains to Dynamite and all the news that's been going on as the past 24 hours. AEW, it's been crazy. Number one, like I told you guys, let's talk about this TV deal, man, and how I feel about it. Number one, it was reported yesterday that AEW has signed their deal with Warner Brothers Discovery, Time Warner, for what I believe is going to be 4 years, $180 million, close to $200 million a year for the next 4 years, with the addition of HBO Max, which I was a huge fan of until I figured out really what was going on with HBO Max. Now, when it pertains to HBO Max will simulcast Dynamite and Collision starting, I believe, January 2025, which is a big deal. And AEW will have their library on HBO Max. You can watch the original episode of Dynamite all the way up until now, which is a big, big deal for a lot of fans. The biggest downside, I would say, from this is actually the HBO Max deal in the aspect that they are still charging people money for their pay-per-views on HBO Max. So if you guys are a current subscriber to HBO Max like myself, you know, when these pay-per-views come in next year, you still have to pay for the pay-per-view, but it's going to be at a discounted price. Now, how I felt about this, I kind of felt like it was a gut punch. Not only for, you know, people that are subscribed to HBO Max, but for, you know, for AEW. To me, I feel like this was something that could have came with a subscription if you are a subscriber to HBO Max and watch, you know, the pay-per-views for AEW at the price that you pay for the subscription for HBO Max, whether it was a month-to-month fee or you're paying bi-yearly. I pay bi-yearly, but it still adds on to the fee for the pay-per-views going into next year. What that discounted rate could be, I don't know. It could go from $50 for the pay-per-views down to $40 or $45 or maybe $30. I don't know. That I wasn't a big fan of. Now, am I surprised that they signed their deal? No. I'm happy with the fact that they're putting their stuff on HBO Max, but again, there was also other things telling about this. Rampage, for example. Rampage was not mentioned in this TV deal with Time Warner and Warner Media. And there's a lot of speculation that Rampage that we see for 1 hour on Friday nights will be scrapped, and we will no longer have Rampage going into the new year. How I feel about this, honestly, I can care less. I don't cover Rampage. I think Rampage is, you know, an hour wasted, to be honest with you. I know there's been a lot of speculation, even from Swerve Strickland, that, you know, AEW and Tony Khan are also in talks with Fox to have another wrestling TV program presented on Fox. And I know it's been widely speculated that new TV show might be known as Shockwave. Now, I don't know if Shockwave is going to be a new event or it's going to be their new TV show. A lot of people were saying if they do a new TV show, most likely it would be either on Tuesdays or Thursdays. They don't want to compete with Monday Night Raw nor Friday Night SmackDown. To me, most likely if Shockwave was going to happen and be on Fox, I would most likely see it being on Tuesday nights because I still feel like there's a little hostility there between AEW and NXT, with obviously NXT being on the CW network, their new home, and if Shockwave gets a TV deal for Fox, that's a new TV deal for AEW, and what better way to do that but than compete with NXT. But it was a big deal. You know, there was a lot of news coming out for AEW yesterday, mainly pertaining to the AEW TV deal and the media rights deal for AEW. And it's a big deal, man. I mean, like I said, I'm not surprised that AEW is not, I'm not surprised AEW is sticking it out with Time Warner and Warner Media. I mean, they've been with them now for 5 years, and they're probably going to be with them for another 4 years. With that being said, like I said, the details that I got financials-wise is that I believe the deal is for almost $200 million a year for the next 4 years for AEW, with AEW going over also to HBO Max. Like I said earlier, Dynamite and Collision will be simulcast on HBO Max, and they will have a library of Dynamites on there as well. Like I said, you can go back and watch the original Dynamite, and pay-per-views will also be available on HBO Max, I believe, starting next year in January at a discounted rate. So, like I said, I think that's the one negative for me as far as the TV deal is concerned, is the fact that they're putting pay-per-views on HBO Max, but you still had to pay for the pay-per-view price, even though it's at a discounted rate. I feel like that was kind of a gut punch. But besides all that, man, I mean, Dynamite last night wasn't a bad show. No. It was not a bad show, but I will say this. Are there things that could have been done better? Absolutely. The Ricochet and Ospreay match, number one, was a pay-per-view quality matchup. It could have been on Wrestle Dream, hands down. Or Grand Slam, number one. Number two, the build. The lack of build, the lack of storyline is really, really crippling this company. And, if it's bad, I'm going to tell you all it's bad. If it's good, I'm going to tell you it's good. The match was good, but the build towards this matchup was awful. And like I said earlier, man, I know there's history there between Ricochet and Ospreay. Obviously, they've had matches on the Indies, whether it was Rev Pro or PWG, and I get that. But a lot of fans, didn't watch PWG or don't watch Rev Pro. So, to me, bringing this into the limelight now, obviously fans know that Ricochet was a part of WWE and Ospreay's been with New Japan and AEW. But not a lot of people know the history there between Ospreay and Ricochet. So, I feel like the build really took a lot away out of this matchup between Ricochet and Ospreay. And my biggest other thing about this matchup is, where do you put Ricochet after this? Does Ricochet get pushed back down the ladder? Are we going to see, Ricochet on Ring of Honor and Rampage and stuff like that? Or is he still going to be on the main event scene on AEW's premier show with AEW Dynamite? That's the biggest question I have coming out of that match as far as Ricochet is concerned. It seems like Ospreay has his sights set on, or at least Takeshita has his sights set on Will Ospreay and Ospreay's international title. So I'm all for that. Their first match, like I told you guys earlier, was an absolute banger. It was a great matchup. And to be honest with you, I'm a big fan of Will Ospreay, but it is also a shame that we don't have singles gold around Takeshita's waist. I think Takeshita should be a world champion. I think he has a lot to bring into AEW. The fact that he's working with Don Callis is also great. To be honest with you, I also want to see a singles match between Okada versus Takeshita, which we also haven't got that yet. So I don't know why Tony Khan's, not pushing for that match either. But it looks like Takeshita will have his sights set on Will Ospreay and Ospreay's international title. And like I said, man, maybe we'll see Takeshita have singles gold around his waist here relatively soon. The other thing I'm going to talk about is the overrun last night. The overrun last night was absolutely insane. It was about almost a 30-minute overrun, and quite frankly, I didn't get it, to be honest with you. And I don't know if it's because they threw matches together throughout the card with Private Party versus the Iron Savages and stuff like that, but man, the overrun was not needed. It was a humongous overrun, about a 30-minute overrun, just kind of tying up loose ends here, I think, with Jon Moxley and Bryan Danielson. They announced a match that Danielson would team up with Yuta, taking on Claudio and Pac, if I'm not mistaken. So, obviously, there's going to be build-up there between Bryan Danielson and Mox leading up to Wrestle Dream, which should be a very, very good match. But I don't think the overrun was absolutely necessary last night for Dynamite. But with that being said, man, I mean, like I said, the problem with AEW is the fact that they can't build storylines. And a lot of people, even with the additions of MVP and Shelton Benjamin, and obviously the addition possibly most likely of Bobby Lashley, A lot of people are saying that AEW is becoming the dumping ground, if you will, of former WWE talent or talent that WWE is no longer want, their services anymore. You look at somebody like Shelton, who's 40-some years old, and MVP, and Bobby Lashley. They're up there in age, man. Now, that being said, am I excited to see Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin and MVP in an AEW ring? Absolutely. But my thing is, it's also taking away the original narrative of what AEW was all about 5 years ago. That they were going to be the alternative and they were going to be the change in pro wrestling. And I feel like they have completely drifted away from that alternative and that mission statement. The tag team division is abysmal. And that's one of the reasons why I do not blame the Lucha Bros, Rey Fenix and Penta, to want to leave AEW and go over to WWE, because there is really no tag team division, in my honest opinion. And to be honest with you, I mean, like I said, it's just they're drifting away from the original mission statement, changing the wrestling world. It's just not the same. The first 3 years of AEW were red hot. The past 2 years have been abysmal, man. It has not been good. To me, there hasn't been a really good storyline to really sink your teeth into as of late. And to be honest with you, with some of the talent being out, whether it's Adam Cole and Swerve and MJF and Kenny Omega, Powerhouse Hobbs, Ricky Starks, Miro, those talents, unfortunately, are really, really missed for AEW, and they need them back, because AEW doesn't know how to build up their current talent now. And I do feel as if some of the current AEW talent are getting pushed aside here for WWE talent. And I mentioned this recently, that, a lot of high-profile matches that we have with AEW, it's either someone that has originally signed with AEW versus someone who's came over from WWE or New Japan. It's not AEW versus AEW. You know what I mean? You look at Jon Moxley and Bryan Danielson, that's two former WWE guys. You look at Swerve and Page, Swerve's a former WWE guy going up against an AEW guy with Adam Page. You know what I mean? So it's not AEW homegrown versus AEW homegrown. That's not going to happen. Tony Khan, he's bringing in these WWE talents, and I'm sure we're going to have more down the line. And like I said, it's going to be interesting to see how they all play out and how it fits into the fold. Are we going to have more people leave AEW? Yeah. I still believe Ricky Starks is going to leave. I think Wardlow's going to leave. I think Malachi Black most likely will leave. I know WWE really wants to get him back into the E, which, I mean, I'm all for it, to be honest with you, because they have no idea what to do with Aleister Black or Malachi Black and the House of Black. But again, like I said, as far as I'm concerned, I'm excited for AEW's future, regardless of what's going on right now. Obviously, signing a TV deal for the next 4 years, $200 million a year, it's a great deal. And obviously having, the library and AEW pay-per-views on HBO Max is also a big deal for AEW for the foreseeable future. But I'm also hoping that there is a little fire under Tony Khan to really get AEW pushing back to what it wants to, what it once was, or at least intensify and make the shows better. Because at the end of the day, we need storyline, man. We need storyline. We need direction of where these matches are going and build up towards these pay-per-views. And we're not getting that right now. We're not. And to be honest with you, with Wrestle Dream, the way it's playing out, I don't think it's going to be the greatest pay-per-view that AEW's putting together. You got Mark Briscoe and Jericho, with all due respect to them. And that's one of the biggest things that kind of pissed me off with Ring of Honor. Ring of Honor is a dead brand. I hate telling you all that. If you're fans of Ring of Honor, it is a dead brand. It is not what it used to be back in the day. It's just not. Tony Khan has purchased Ring of Honor, and Ring of Honor it's awful, man, to be honest with you. And Ring of Honor also wasn't even a part of this Time Warner new deal. So I don't know what Ring of Honor is going to do or what. But having a Ring of Honor title match on an AEW pay-per-view, I don't need that. Ring of Honor has its pay-per-views. Let the belt be defended on Ring of Honor pay-per-views. We do not need that on an AEW pay-per-view. And that's what I mean by Tony Khan having way too much shit on his plate right now. You know what I mean? You're running Ring of Honor, Dynamite, Rampage, and Collision. And with a possible another show with Shockwave, he's going to have to loosen the reins a little bit and give somebody else, a little bit more control than what he's got right now. The other thing I want to talk about is Shane. I haven't heard anything else from Shane McMahon since even that picture surfaced between him and the Young Bucks. Now, do I think Shane McMahon will be a part of AEW? I still believe that Shane, in some kind of capacity, will be involved with AEW. I just think it's too coincidental that, you had Shane have a meeting at an airport in Texas with, I think it was Arlington, with Tony Khan. And then you had pictures surface of the Bucks and Shane McMahon. I just think it's a matter of time that we do see Shane. And I think Shane might also be a part of this storyline here with Jon Moxley. Because it seems like Moxley's getting it, from what he was saying last night, it looks like he's getting his orders from somebody else. Somebody that's higher up. And I feel like that might be Shane. Shane's going to come in and try to take a global takedown of everything that Tony Khan and AEW has built over the past 5 years. And that's the best way to do it, have Shane come in and have Shane as a heel. It sells itself, man. And that's the problem with AEW. They need to start picking up the pace with storylines and picking up the pace with building towards these pay-per-views. But like I said, I am excited for the future of AEW. I am. And I'm excited for the additions of MVP and Shelton Benjamin and possibly, most likely, Bobby Lashley. Lashley's going to be a force to be reckoned with. I think Lashley still has a lot of time on his belt in pro wrestling, as well as Shelton Benjamin. Shelton Benjamin has always been that guy who's been severely overrated, to be honest with you. I think Shelton's going to have a lot of good matches in AEW. My biggest problem with this, though, is how you're going to fit them into the fold. And also, I know they're probably going to be looking for more people. I would also add Powerhouse Hobbs to this table, to be honest with you, because I don't think there's a whole lot of faith right now with Hobbs having a singles run and nothing being really attached to Hobbs. Obviously Hobbs was a part of Brian Cage, stable and stuff like that at one time. I think Hobbs need to, line himself up with the Hurt Syndicate. It just fits perfectly. Absolutely. And not only that, I mean, MVP also, back in the day was a big fan and wanted the name of the Nation of Domination. This is a new and improved Nation of Domination here if they're able to get Powerhouse Hobbs, Bobby Lashley, MVP, and Shelton Benjamin, and they can run, the Hurt Syndicate can run roughshod on the AEW roster. It's perfect. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Bobby Lashley in a title match here relatively soon once he comes over into AEW, which is probably going to happen next week or probably Wrestle Dream. Most likely that Bobby Lashley will debut with AEW, and it'd be a great addition to the roster. But that's my biggest takeaway, man. I'm not going to sit here and say that AEW Dynamite last night was bad or anything else, or, it was a horrible show. No, I think it was a good show. They had a lot of decent matches on the card. I think the overrun was a little too much. And, obviously the lack of storylines and the build towards these matches is really crippling AEW and this company. As far as creative is concerned, there's no creative. Absolutely not. And if they had that, this company would flourish, man, even more than what it's doing now. But I'm excited for the future. I am. I'm excited for the future. I'm excited for what's to come down the pike with AEW. And, different pay-per-views and different matches and stuff like that. And what's next for AEW. Especially now that he just signed this new TV rights deal with Warner Brothers Discovery and pay-per-views going over to HBO Max. It's going to be a very interesting year in pro wrestling going into the new year of 2025. And I'm definitely interested to see what happens with AEW and even WWE going into the new year, because Raw will also be on Netflix starting next year in January. So it's definitely going to be an interesting year all in all for pro wrestling, and I'm definitely looking forward to it next year. But with that being said, this is my review of AEW's Dynamite. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.